My friends, let us come together for a moment and grow still within ourselves, for without inner stillness it is impossible to discern the truth I would share with you. In the midst of all the seeking and searching that fills human life, there lies one simple misunderstanding, one false assumption that has shaped the world's entire sense of God, of prayer, and of spiritual living. It is the belief that somehow, somewhere, there is a gap between you and the presence that formed you, sustains you, and lives as your very being. This sense of separation is not evil, nor is it a sin, but it is the root of all fear, all lack, and all loneliness. It is the foundation of the world's ceaseless search for a God it imagines to be outside, above, or beyond. Every religion, every philosophy, every method of prayer has arisen from this one belief that we stand here as finite creatures and God stands elsewhere as infinite creator. And from that belief, we stretch out our hands, our thoughts, our desires, always reaching, always imploring, always hoping that somehow the divine will notice our plea and bring us the peace we imagine to be withheld. But I say to you today, as gently and as clearly as I can, that this search has been in vain, not because God is absent, but because God has never been apart from you. The presence you seek is the very life that beats your heart. The peace you long for is the stillness behind every breath you draw. The love you call upon in your darkest hours is the love that has never once left you, never once failed you, never once separated itself from you. The tragedy is not that humanity has missed God. The tragedy is that humanity has looked everywhere else first. Now, the infinite way has always stood upon one foundational revelation, and it is this: God is not external to your being. God is not a power to be summoned. God is not a presence to be attracted. God is the very essence of your own consciousness, the life of your life, the soul of your soul, the I of your being. And until this truth begins to dawn in your awareness, your prayers will remain petitions, your spiritual path will remain effort, and your peace will remain temporary. But the moment, yes, the very moment you turn from the outward search to the inward recognition, something remarkable occurs. You begin to feel the faint stirrings of a presence that has always been there, not coming to you, not approaching you, but revealing itself as the one that has never departed. This is the beginning of all true spiritual realization. It is the moment when the mind grows quiet enough, humble enough, receptive enough to hear the ancient truth whispered through the ages. I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. Not because you have earned it, not because you are deserving, but because separation has never been real. And so, in this opening hour, together, let us lay aside every notion of distance between ourselves and God. Let us suspend the belief that we must struggle to reach the sacred, for what we seek is already here, closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. The I am that spoke through the prophets, that lived through the Christ, that inspired the mystics of every age, is the same I am that animates your very being this moment. There is no separation in that which is indivisible. There is no distance in that which is omnipresent. And there is no search required where the truth is already within. This is the revelation we will unfold together, that the I am, the presence, the Christ of your own consciousness has been the answer to your seeking from the beginning, and that when this is realized, the search for God ends forever, not because God has been found, but because you awaken to the truth that you were never apart. the I am, before the personal me. Let us move gently now into the heart of this teaching. For without this next recognition, all the spiritual practices in the world would merely reinforce the very illusion we are seeking to dissolve. The greatest forgotten truth in all of mystical unfoldment is that there exists within you an identity, an I that is older than your birth, untouched by your history, and unbound by the conditions of this world. It is the I am that was present before you called yourself by any name, before you were given any role, any title, any story. And it is this I am that Scripture speaks of when it says, before Abraham was, I am. Now, I ask you to listen with the ear of your spirit, not the reasoning mind, for what I am saying cannot be grasped by argument or analysis. It must be allowed to touch that quiet center within you that has always known, always recognized, always intuited that the personal me you carry through this world is not the fullness of your being. From the moment you were born, you were taught to identify with a set of labels, your personality, your habits, your successes and failures, your fears and desires. And over time, these labels solidified into a self you believed yourself to be. But that self, this me, is as changeable as the weather. It grows, it withers, it reacts, it resists. It is affected by praise and wounded by criticism. It is driven by fear and pulled by desire. It is the self that suffers, the self that struggles, the self that prays to something beyond itself for relief. Yet behind that self, beneath it, before it, there stands a presence that has never suffered, never lacked, never feared, and this presence is the I am, the divine identity, which is the same yesterday, today, and forever. You see, the mistake we make is believing that the I am is the personal self, saying, I am good, I am tired, I am afraid. But no, that is not the I am. That is the mind attempting to clothe the divine in human garments. The true I am is silent, still, unconditioned. It is the pure awareness that notices thought but is not touched by thought, that witnesses emotion but is not bound by emotion. It is the presence that cannot be enhanced by praise nor diminished by condemnation. If you will sit quietly for even a moment and observe the one who is aware, the one who is present before thought arises, you will begin to sense the I am that is your true identity. This is not imagination, it is recognition. It is not effort, it is remembrance. For the I that you have believed yourself to be is only the surface appearance of a much deeper reality. And the spiritual life begins not when you attempt to improve the personal self, but when you recognize that the personal self has never been your self at all. Now, the world has forgotten this truth because it has lost the ability to look within. It has become hypnotized by form, mesmerized by personality, conditioned by the belief that the individual is separate from the divine. And so the personal me is worshipped, defended, and struggled with endlessly. But the infinite way reveals that the I am, the true self, is not confined in the body, not limited by circumstance, not influenced by the ebb and flow of human experience. It is the life of God individualized as you. And here lies the great turning point. When you begin to sense even faintly that the I, which is your true identity, is not the person you appear to be, the search for God begins to dissolve. For the seeker and the sought are one. The awareness that is looking for God is the very presence of God looking through you. The one who longs for truth is the truth itself stirring within you. The one who desires awakening is the awakened presence inviting you to remember. This is the great forgotten truth, the I am that breathes your breath, that animates your life, that watches through your eyes, is nothing less than the infinite appearing as the finite, the eternal expressing as the temporal, the divine living itself as your individual being. When this begins to dawn in your consciousness, you will find that the personal self slowly relinquishes its grip, not through force, but through the quiet recognition that it has never been the center of your life. The I am has always been the center, and to that I am we now turn more consciously. Let us look now, quietly and honestly, at how this sense of separation ever took root in our experience. For you see, the separation itself is not real, only the belief in it appears real. And yet, the moment we believe it, we begin to live out the consequences of that belief as though it were fact. When we entered this world, we entered it innocent, unconditioned, untouched by fear or self-judgment, but almost immediately, the world began to instruct us, not intentionally, not maliciously, but unconsciously. It taught us that we were a separate self, a small self, a vulnerable self. It taught us that we were a physical body, born to certain parents, belonging to a certain culture, functioning in a world governed by physical laws and psychological patterns. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, our attention became fixed on the outer realm, on appearances, on conditions, on the behavior of others, on the state of our own minds and bodies. We learned to evaluate ourselves by what we could see, hear, touch, and feel. This is me, we said, pointing to the body. These are my thoughts, my emotions, my memories, and with that simple identification came the birth of the personal self, the self that believes it stands apart from the infinite, apart from the one who formed it. It is this personal identity that feels fear because it imagines itself exposed. It feels lack because it imagines supply must come from outside. It feels guilt because it imagines it must justify its existence before God. And so the human race began to search for God as something external up in the sky, hidden in buildings of stone, trapped in rituals or doctrines. The search itself became the evidence of the belief in separation. If God were truly within, how could you ever seek him without? But I want you to understand something very clearly. This belief in separation did not arise because you are sinful or unworthy. It arose because the world is hypnotized by appearances, hypnotized by form, hypnotized by the false assumption that the outer world is the source of life. And in this hypnosis, humanity forgot the ancient truth that life is lived from within outward, not from without inward. This is why Goldsmith said, "We were born under the law, not under grace." He meant that from infancy. We were conditioned to live by the laws of the external world, laws of fear, law of cause and effect, law of judgment, law of comparison, law of personal striving. And as long as the mind believes itself subject to these laws, it also believes itself separate from the one who transcends them. But the moment you begin to question this conditioning even slightly, the hypnosis begins to weaken when you pause and ask, is this personal self truly who I am? The spiritual dawn begins when you notice that your awareness is present even when thoughts are absent, you begin to sense an identity deeper than the mind. When you taste a moment of stillness, and in that stillness feel peace without a cause, love without an object, existence. Without effort, you are touching the edges of your true being. In that instant, the world's story of separation begins to lose its hold. Let me say this plainly. The separation was never real. The belief came from conditioning, and conditioning came from ignorance, not truth. No action of yours created separation, and no action of yours is required to bridge it. Only recognition dissolves it, the recognition that what you are in truth has never been touched by the world's beliefs. And so, as we go forward, we must remember that spirituality is not the process of becoming something better, something higher, or something holier. It is the simple, profound unveiling of what has always been present, the I am, that no conditioning could alter and no belief could conceal in this recognition. The long human story of separation begins gently, quietly, lovingly to fade. Now, once we see even faintly that the sense of separation was never a fact but only a belief, something remarkable begins to occur in our consciousness. We notice that the energy we once poured into the outward search begins to lose its appeal. The endless attempts to reform the world, to fix people, to manipulate circumstances, or to persuade God to intervene, all of this activity begins to feel strangely hollow, and this is a sacred moment, for it marks the beginning of a profound inner turning. This turning is not dramatic. It is not emotional. It is often not even deliberate. It is more like a gentle shift, a softening, a quiet recognition that the answers we seek cannot come from outside ourselves. The infinite cannot be found in the finite. Peace cannot be discovered in the realm of constant change. God cannot be known through external effort, outer technique, or mental striving. And so, something in us stops reaching outward and begins to listen inwardly. This listening is the beginning of true prayer. Not prayer as the world teaches it, not the pleading, the asking, the persuading, but prayer as communion, prayer as receptivity, prayer as the silent awareness of the presence that is already here. You see, as long as we speak to God, we are inadvertently holding God as separate. As long as we ask for something, we are affirming that something is lacking. But when we grow still enough to listen, we discover that God has been speaking all along, not in words, but in presence. Joel Goldsmith called this the greatest secret of prayer. True prayer is listening, not speaking. Listening for what? Listening for the assurance of the presence. Listening for the peace that says, "Be still and know that I am God." Listening for that quiet inner movement that is not thought, not imagination, not emotion, but the felt awareness of life revealing itself as us. And so, you see, the inner turn is not a technique. It is a releasing of the world's hypnosis. It is a letting go of the belief that the outer world holds your peace, your supply, your health, your fulfillment. When this belief loosens its grip, your attention naturally, effortlessly sinks back into the sanctuary of your own being. And there, in that inner sanctuary, you begin to sense something you may not have felt before, an underlying presence that does not come and go, a subtle luminosity behind every breath, a quiet strength that is not of this world. When this moment arrives, the spiritual search begins to end, not because God has been found somewhere, But because the seeker realizes, often with great humility, that the one he sought was the one who was doing the seeking, the search ends not in attainment, but in recognition. The outward seeking dissolves, and what remains is the silent awareness of I am closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. At this stage, you may still have questions. The mind may still attempt to analyze or grasp, but even that begins to soften, because now you know, at least to some degree, that the great treasure is not outside yourself. You begin to understand why Jesus said the kingdom of God is within you, not within the body, not within the mind, not within the personality, but within your consciousness, within that very awareness, which right now is hearing these words. This is the sacred turning point. It is the quiet beginning of the end of separation. It is when the soul awakens to its own source and begins to follow a new inner rhythm, a new inner guidance, one that comes not from the world, but from the eternal that has always been your life. As we turn more fully within, something begins to unfold, something not born of thought, not born of imagination, but born of the spirit itself. We start to sense, almost like a fragrance in the air, that the presence we seek is not separate from the one who is seeking. The divine life we long for is not something to acquire. It is something that has been living us, breathing us, sustaining us from the very beginning. And it is here that we begin to touch the true meaning of I am. The I am is not the personal self declaring, I am strong, I am weak, I am spiritual, or I am sinful. All of these are mental garments, labels placed upon the infinite light. No, the true I am stands prior to all description. It is the pure awareness of being itself. It is the I that remains when every thought subsides, when every emotion dissolves, when every role and identity falls away. It is the I that was present before you were given a name, before you were taught who you were supposed to be. This I am is the Christ, not a person, not a historical figure confined to space and time, but the presence of God individualized as you. It is the divine consciousness localized in your awareness, the infinite expressing through the appearance of a finite form. When Jesus said, I and the Father are one, he was not speaking of a unique privilege. He was revealing the nature of this I am one with God, inseparable from God, an expression of God. And so you must begin to feel, not merely believe, that the I that is aware of this moment is not the mortal self, it is not the mind that thinks, nor the body that ages, nor the emotions that fluctuate. The true I is the presence that watches the mind, that witnesses the body, that beholds the emotions. It is the silent observer, the eternal life behind all appearances. This I cannot be harmed, cannot be sick, cannot be lonely, cannot be impoverished. For this I is spirit, pure and perfect. Now, this recognition may come gently, like a soft dawn spreading across the horizon of consciousness. You may not feel it all at once, but as you continue to rest inwardly, without effort, without strain, you will begin to detect a certain aliveness, a quiet, luminous presence that is always here, whether you acknowledge it or not. It is not emotional. It is not dramatic. It is not accompanied by visions or sensations. It is simply the awareness of being, the stillness beneath all movement, the light behind all appearances. And as this recognition deepens, you discover something wondrous. You cannot lose the I am. You cannot be separated from the I am. You cannot improve the I am, nor can you diminish it. For the I am is God being you. It is the life that animates every cell of your body. It is the intelligence that guides every function. It is the love that draws all things into harmony. It is the peace that remains even when the world is in turmoil. When you say I, you are uttering the holiest name of God, not the personal I, but the divine I, the universal I, the I that has no opposite. And your spiritual life will unfold in direct proportion to your willingness to abide in this recognition, to return again and again to the simple awareness, I am. This is the secret that dissolves fear, ends the search, and reveals the kingdom already within you, not because you have attained anything, but because the one who lives as you has finally been recognized, recognizing the I am in daily life. Now, my friends, let us come to something very practical, not practical in the worldly sense of technique or method, but practical in the spiritual sense of living from truth rather than merely hearing it. For it is one thing to glimpse the I am in moments of quiet contemplation, but it is another to carry that recognition into the ordinary movements of daily life. Yet this is precisely what brings transformation, not the accumulation of knowledge, but the steady remembrance of what you truly are. The practice I speak of is not a discipline imposed by the mind. It is not a ritual, a formula, or a technique. It is nothing more and nothing less than a gentle returning of attention to the I am whenever you notice yourself slipping back into the hypnosis of the personal self. And I assure you, this slipping will happen daily, for the mind is conditioned by centuries of belief in separation. But every time you return to the awareness of I am, the conditioning weakens, and the truth within you grows stronger. How do we begin? Start simply. In any moment, whether you are walking, working, resting, or simply breathing, pause inwardly and recognize, I am here, not as a body, not as a personality, but as presence, as awareness, as the silent witness of this moment. When stress arises, do not rush to solve it. Instead, notice the one who is aware of the stress. Turn attention away from the problem and toward the observing presence. In that instant of recognition, you shift from the personal me to the impersonal I am, and you will find that peace begins to blossom without your effort. When fear appears, do not fight it. Fighting fear strengthens it. Instead, quietly acknowledge, I am, and therefore all is well. The personal sense may feel frightened, but the I am, the real self, remains untouched. The moment you rest in this recognition, fear begins to lose its authority when lack seems to confront you. Resist the urge to calculate, to analyze, to worry your way into solutions. These attempts arise from the belief that supply comes from the world, but supply is the outward expression of inner consciousness. So simply pause and remember, the I that I am is infinite abundance, invisible and ever present. You will find that new avenues open, unexpected resources appear, and what seemed impossible begins to unfold naturally, not through struggle, but through consciousness. In moments of conflict, whether with a colleague, a family member, or a stranger, do not attempt to change the other person. Recognize instead the I am in yourself. and then silently recognize it in them. When you behold the divine identity behind the mask of human behavior, something changes not in them, but in your consciousness. And consciousness is the only arena in which anything real occurs. Throughout your day, use brief moments standing in line, sitting in traffic, preparing a meal, to gently return to the awareness of being. Whisper inwardly, I am. Feel the quiet presence behind the activity. This simple recognition is the foundation of spiritual living. It needs no effort, no intensity. It simply needs consistency. Now, do not misunderstand. You are not using the I am to fix problems. If you attempt to use truth for personal ends, you will reinforce the very sense of separation you are trying to dissolve. The I am is not a tool for the personal self. It is the dissolution of the personal self. When you abide in I am, problems do not need solving. They lose their sense of power. Conditions do not need changing. They reveal their spiritual harmony. The world does not need controlling. It begins to reflect the peace established within you. Let me offer you a simple contemplative inquiry, one that can be returned to again and again, before any thought arises, before any emotion appears, before any image of yourself comes to mind. What am I? Do not answer this with words. Rest in the silence that follows. That silence is the doorway into the I am. You will find, as you practice in this way, that daily life becomes infused with a depth of peace you have never known. Problems do not vanish, but your relationship to them changes so profoundly that they cease to dominate your experience. The world continues to move, but you no longer move with its turbulence. You begin to live from the center, not the circumference. And in that center, the I am abides eternally. When the false self fades, as we continue this inward journey, something begins to unfold that cannot be forced and cannot be hurried. It is the gradual dissolving of the false self, the personal sense of me that has walked through life carrying its fears, its burdens, its private anxieties, and its endless sense of need. This fading of the false self is not an accomplishment. It is a natural consequence of abiding in the truth. When the light of I am grows clearer in consciousness, the shadows that once appeared so real begin to recede on their own. You see, fear is never overcome by resisting it or by fighting it. Fear is the direct result of believing that we stand alone, that we are vulnerable creatures navigating an unpredictable world. Fear is the child of separation. But when the true I is recognized, the I am that is one with God, fear has nothing left to hold on to. It cannot survive in the presence of that which knows only oneness. Fear belongs to the personal self, not to the I am. And the moment your attention shifts from the personal to the impersonal, from the finite to the infinite, fear begins to loosen its grip without any struggle on your part. Even need dissolves in this way, not because we deny the human picture, but because we no longer accept the human picture as the final truth. The belief in need arises from the assumption that supply is external, dependent on people, conditions, opportunities, or circumstances. But the I am is the source and substance of all supply. When you recognize this, you find that your sense of lack softens, and with it, the anxiety that lack creates. The fullness of God does not enter your life from the outside. It reveals itself from within, as the consciousness of I am takes its rightful place at the center of your being. Now, let us speak plainly. The false self does not disappear all at once. Its patterns may still arise. Old fears may still whisper. The mind may still leap to conclusions based on appearances. But each time you catch yourself identifying with this personal me, each time you pause and return to the awareness of I am, a veil is lifted, a layer of illusion is removed, and little by little, what once felt heavy begins to feel lighter, until eventually the false self no longer commands your allegiance. This is why Goldsmith said over and over that our work is not to fix conditions, but to recognize the truth behind them, for conditions are merely the shadows cast by belief. They have no real power of their own. Disease, conflict, limitation, disharmony, these are appearances, and appearances are never the presence of truth. When you withdraw the belief that they have power, they begin to fade. Let me say this clearly. You do not overcome fear by trying to be brave. You overcome fear by knowing that the I that you are is fearless. You do not overcome need by accumulating things or securing your future. You overcome need by realizing that the I am is infinite abundance, expressing as your very being. You do not overcome loneliness by seeking companionship. You overcome loneliness by realizing that the presence is closer than breath, and that the self that lives you is never alone when the false self begins to fade. What emerges is a quiet confidence, not confidence in the personal me, but confidence in the presence that goes before you, that surrounds you, that lives as you. You begin to feel safe in a way you may never have felt before, not because circumstances have changed, but because you no longer look to circumstances for safety. You begin to feel guided, not because a voice speaks to you in words, but because an inner rightness reveals itself moment by moment. You begin to feel fulfilled, not because desires have been met, but because the sense of lack itself has dissolved. This is the miracle of spiritual awakening. It is not the changing of the outer world, but the dissolving of the inner illusion. And as the false self fades, you discover that nothing was ever missing, nothing was ever broken, nothing was ever separate. The I am has been whole, complete, and perfect from the very beginning. And now, little by little, you are beginning to live from that wholeness. As the false sense of self fades and the light of I am begins to illumine your awareness, life itself takes on a very different quality, not because the world suddenly becomes perfect, but because you are no longer living from the world. You begin to live from the center, from that divine presence, which is your true identity, and from that moment onward, the entire spiritual journey changes. No longer are you a seeker. No longer are you one who strives to attain God, to reach God, or to convince God, for you have discovered that the one you sought has been the one who was living you all along. This is the great paradox of spiritual awakening. The search ends not when God is found, but when the seeker disappears. When the I am is recognized as your own being, the longing for something external evaporates. You are not reaching outward for peace. You are resting in the peace already within you. You are not begging for guidance. You are listening to the stillness that has always guided you. You are not trying to attract supply. You are trusting the invisible source that pours itself into expression through your consciousness. You are not asking for healing. You are recognizing the wholeness that was never impaired. And as this recognition deepens, you begin to discover another beautiful truth, that life lived from the I am unfolds through grace, not through effort. There is a quiet rhythm to your days, an inward harmony that is not dependent upon circumstance. Problems still arise in the outer world, but they no longer stir the depths of your being. They touch only the surface, like ripples on a lake whose depths remain undisturbed. You find yourself responding from peace rather than reacting from fear. You meet situations with clarity rather than confusion. You interact with others from love rather than from need or defense. Relationships begin to change not because you work on them, but because the presence begins to live through you. When you behold the I am in yourself, you naturally begin to behold it in others. You see through the masks of personality and glimpse the same divine light appearing in countless forms. The urge to judge softens, the tendency to criticize dissolves, compassion arises without effort, and because you are no longer trying to change anyone, harmony begins to reveal itself where conflict once appeared. Even supply takes on a new meaning. You no longer think in terms of getting or keeping. You begin to understand, through actual experience, that supply is the outward expression of inner consciousness. When the I am is recognized as the source, supply flows not as something you manipulate, but as something that naturally unfolds. Opportunities come without strain, resources appear without anxiety, and needs are met without fear. Because consciousness itself is providing, healing becomes different as well. You do not heal by attempting to fix the body or correct conditions. You heal by recognizing the spiritual perfection that is already present. Even if the outer picture appears otherwise, the body becomes an instrument for the expression of the I am, and its harmony is restored as consciousness reveals its wholeness. This is not willpower. It is not mental effort. It is the silent activity of grace. But perhaps the most profound change occurs within your sense of identity. You no longer think of yourself as a human being striving for spiritual understanding. You begin to feel from within that you are a spiritual being appearing as a human experience. You are not the mind. You are not the emotions. You are not the body. You are the awareness in which all of these come and go. You are the I am that is eternal, unchanging, indivisible. And as this reality becomes more constant, you notice something extraordinary. The desire to seek God fades, not because you have grown indifferent, but because you have awakened to the truth that God is the very essence of your being. Seeking implies distance. Realization reveals oneness. The search ends not in attainment, but in quiet recognition. In this state, you do not stop living your human life. You work, you love, you serve, you create, but you do so from a deeper foundation. You do so from presence rather than from personality. Your actions become expressions of the inner I am, not attempts to secure your good. Your decisions arise from intuition rather than from fear. Your life becomes a continuous unfolding guided by the invisible currents of spirit. This is the life of realization, not dramatic, not miraculous in the worldly sense, but profoundly peaceful, inwardly free, deeply stable, and quietly luminous. It is the life that begins when you know with certainty that the I am within you is the very presence of God, and that you have never, even for a moment, been separate from it. As we come gently to the close of this time together, let us rest in the assurance of what has been revealed, not as new information, not as something acquired, but as the uncovering of a truth that has lived within you from the beginning. For every word spoken here, every silence between the words, has pointed to only one reality, that the I which you are is the presence of God, eternally complete, eternally whole, eternally one. It is important that you understand this. Spiritual realization is not a moment in time. It is not an experience that comes and then goes. It is the gradual unveiling of what has always been present, always shining, always whispering beneath the noise of human thought. Even when you feel distant from it, even when you forget, even when you fall into old patterns, nothing changes the truth that the I am is the very life that lives you. The world may tell you that you are separate, that you are incomplete, that you must strive to become worthy of God. But the inner voice tells you something entirely different. It tells you, fear not, I am with you, not beside you, not above you, not watching over you as a separate being, but as your own life, your own awareness, your own true self. This is the meaning of the ancient promise. Lo, I am with you always. It does not mean that God follows you. It does not mean that a divine companion walks behind you. It means that the I am, your being, your consciousness, your awareness, is the very presence of God, and that presence cannot leave you for even a single instant. There has never been a moment of separation. There has only been the belief in separation. And now, perhaps more deeply than before, you can begin to sense that this presence is not fragile. It does not depend upon moods, nor upon outer conditions. It does not diminish when difficulties arise, nor does it disappear when fears whisper. It remains steadfast, silent, unchanging, waiting only for your recognition. Let this bring you comfort. You do not walk the spiritual path alone. You do not seek God alone. You do not awaken by your own strength. The very impulse to seek truth arises from the presence within you that is already awake. When you turn within, even for a moment, you will feel it sometimes softly, sometimes clearly, sometimes only as a quiet peace, but it is there. It has always been there. And as you continue to rest in the awareness of I am, this presence becomes more vivid than any outer experience, more real than any belief, more dependable than any condition. As you leave this moment and return to your daily activities, do not try to hold on to anything. You do not need to preserve this truth, for it is preserving you. Simply be willing, throughout your day, to pause inwardly and remember, I am. Let that recognition be enough. Let it be your prayer, your meditation, your refuge, and your guide. Allow the world to be as it is, but live from the truth of what you are. And now, as we close, I leave you with this simple realization. You have never been a seeker of God. You have been the expression of God seeking to remember itself. And now, in this very moment, that remembrance has already begun.